So here we are, carrying on this morning, and okay, so we're talking about Rocket Lab launched out things like the Stick series, which I refer to as HARP, uh, basically Space HARP. Now, the thing about the whole issue about HARP is that it's a horrible subject because on one level, people doing independent media get drowned out in stuff that's misleading. So there's people like coming out going, "Oh, I'm a whistleblower. Oh, they're using the HARP CERN to carry out earthquakes in Christchurch." And Hillary Clinton said out of WikiLeaks. Well, she never said such thing in WikiLeaks. That's a load of bollocks to begin with. And that guy, I don't know who he is. He's but interesting because he's probably part of the same group, John Lear, that turned around and they did a little expose on the tunnels, the Cravisham tunnels that I actually previously exposed and showed that there was experimentations from Canterbury University still going on there. And they sort of fly down, they fly a drone, make it look like they're flying in a helicopter, and they go all the way up into the entrance. They don't show you how they get in, but suddenly they're in. Oh, aren't they clever? Oh, they bypass the security, probably because they were given a key. And then they walk in there and they walk all the way up to the point where there's a staircase, and they could have taken your camera and showed you what was up there, because that'd be really interesting. Because I think that those staircases, because of the extension cord you see in previous photos, actually hasn't been covered up. I think it still goes to other particular locations. We know that it used to go to the Caversham Krafkoff house, a mansion during World War II, got burnt down. I do think it goes to, I at least know one other mansion that I know that I think it goes to, but we'll never know because the John Lear secret people chose not to show that part, and they showed all other material, and they showed a whiteboard, and a lot of bunch of stuff which steered people to look towards direction in one direction, but actually didn't really reveal the fact of how did they actually get in, and why weren't they actually showing us stuff that they could have, since they did have entry, and they didn't. And that's kind of that's the art of disinformation and deflection. So, in actual fact, HARP is High Altitude Atmospheric Research Program. The original base actually wasn't started in Antarctica. It was started in Leverton Electronic Warfare Station, which is pretty much right next door to where the Japanese Colt Shurirenko carried out their experiments into chemical weapons in Australia. Harry Mason's wrote some incredibly good stuff about it. Lots of attempts to discredit him. Things like the original briefing speech by William Cohen from the Secretary of Defence have actually been subsequently edited from the Pentagon thing, so they take out the word cult. That was right up there until I mentioned it on the Vinnie Eastwood show, and then mysteriously that word disappeared from the text. Before, and again, the companies that are surfaced at Honeywell and BAE, they're all members of the Australian American Chamber of Commerce, which is chaired by Tony Podesta. Yes, that Tony Podesta, brother of John Podesta. And they reflect basically what was later built in Antarctica. And the problem was that when people took out on Antarctica, Alaska, Fairbanks University, and one of the things that critics used to say is, oh no, that can't cause earthquakes because it doesn't have enough propagation ability. Well, that's not entirely true, because Alexander Kuzmanov, I think the Kuzmanov is right, don't question me on the Alexander, but he's known as the Russian father of Teutonics, and he talks about the leverage and says, well, actually, no, you don't need as big leverage as has been previously thought, but it does mean that we can actually make those earthquakes occur. It becomes very, very limited. The beams from HARP Alaska and HARP New Zealand intersect just right off the coast of, right off where I live, not too far from Golden Bay. Again, those maps have been taken off the website. Every time I mention them, they seem to get disappeared. But I do have kept them on hard drive copies, and have got a lot of stuff that confirms that HARP was tied up with Canterbury University, which again they keep taking off the internet, but the papers and the stories are already out there confirming it. So the question is, can HARP cause earthquakes? Well, hold back for a second. Let's go with what it can cause, because pretty much, we know that it can be used for looking for deep underground for oil and mineral reserves, and it can be used for looking for communicating with submarines, and it can be used for looking for bunkers. All of that stuff's really, really important stuff, and really important to, like, when you're talking about the power of them, the more powerful they get because of this issue of propagation. When HARP was operating locally down in Alaska, and down in Alaska was the main base, and with the beam going from Alaska to Arctic, where it could be conferred was geographically localized because of the strength of propagation. HARP in space takes you high up to the high ionosphere, where they're closer to the electromagnetic storms, which are basically, again, what the critics who just want to dismiss it out of hand without actually studying the science or thinking about it for a second, or looking at all the declassified papers of atmospheric research into the ionospheres that have taken place here in New Zealand, including research by guys like Colonel Thomas Leach, part of Project SEAL, also the head of the Snorri Hydro Electro Dam project, which also, by the way, carries out Snorri snowy hydro. I think it's just snowy. It's not being snowy here, but they also do chemtrails, which are now called cloud seeding by the new critics. Go, oh no, there's no such thing as chemtrails, but there's been cloud seeding. Oh, they've been doing that for ages. No, actually, they said ignored it for years. They said it was publicly available. Then 70s during Vietnam War, Operation Popeye, Operation Mudpool, Operation Lava Pool. All that stuff basically dropped off the ground as William Burroughs turns around, points out, said chemical weapons, bioweapons, this sort of second generation disruptive technology became media wouldn't cover it. It became a non-subject, and then it was all disappeared until very, very recently, where it's suddenly they've admitted it again. They've re-returned. Oh no, you see, we're doing it's cloud seeding and it's silver iodine. Oh no, it's not barium phosphate. Kind of think you're splitting hairs there a wee bit, and again, but those little those slightly educated people, that doesn't matter. They want to pick the facts that fit with their belief system, so let them go ahead and do that. Meanwhile, Leach was with Snowy Hydro, and that was also part of the Australian secret nuclear program, and also things like part of Operation Crowflight, which are all out there. They're all in the declassified materials, which if you could go and look at, you say there's been a lot of research into the atmosphere for a very, very long time. And the issue of propagation was high up in the atmosphere. Was like, no, HAARP doesn't cause the earthquake itself. What it does is it reaches up into the electromagnetic spectrum where these naturally occurring source does, and it becomes basically like the electric fork in the toaster. So it just becomes a conductor of existing energies, which increasingly, the more and more we study them from, not from a geological viewpoint, but from a astrophysicist viewpoint, which again, most of our mainstream journalists don't know this stuff enough, so they always go after geologists. Go, oh, can man cause earthquakes? Oh, no. Never mind fracking. Never mind. Actually, there's numerous other conventional methodologies which you can, but guys that work at the research that was being carried out, for example, in the 1970s at Walden Gunnery Range at Canterbury University and Antarctica, this was taken all the way up to the upper atmosphere, and they were very aware of what the power potential was. So can it cause earthquakes? Well, we don't know. And the reality is we actually don't know. But if we look at the causative factor in terms of every time that certain earthquakes occur, we get these repeating symptoms in terms of such as earthquake lightning, whale strandings, which are all systematic, naturally occurring and have been occurring beforehand, which would indicate possibly that these are also naturally occurring events. But then you also find out things like, oh, how come every time we go, like Tonga, oh, there just turns out to be a survey ship there that when you look at who they are, oh, they're linked into the Nippon Foundation. Oh, who's the Nippon Foundation? Oh, actually, they're into the deep state military industrial complex. Oh, it's been done here in New Zealand. It's and right up when the Kurns of Kaikoura, what do we find there? Oh, there's the RV Tangaroa and the USS Sampson and a whole bunch of other hardware. So the problem is that quite often when these events occur, the ones that attract my attention is it's what hardware personnel is there and that they keep being there, and the geopolitical timing of the situation enough to make me consider that. I think if you weren't just being, if you were being closed-minded about it, then no, you can't see this stuff and you won't permit it. But if you've been open-minded and saying, I think it's possibly one of the things that we should consider. It's not the main purpose of this video today, neither is chemtrails, but I'm talking to you. What I'm trying to get through to you is that disruptive technologies have been researched for a very, very long time. They're increasingly, because of things like AI and because of increasing geophysical knowledge, the potential of what we knew in the 1940s and the 1950s, when a lot of money was being spent because of World War II, is becoming increasingly more accessible and available. And again, things like increasing tensions in the Middle East is where, for example, the Russians and Chinese have a system called Sura, which for a short time, our Western media, circa about probably 2010, was going, oh yes, this could cause terrible disruption, it might even cause earthquakes, and then someone went, better not say that, because then that means that they can do it, we can do it too. And then they sort of step back from reporting from Syria. But this is what keeps happening. They keep almost getting it out there, and then they step right back. But the geospatial technology that was being carried out in Rocket Lab, so this is Rocket Lab that's taking place there, and then you also find that we've got the guy called Nydorf, Nydorf, name, first name, can't remember me, involved in TerraPower. They're looking at doing nuclear fusion in New Zealand, but which is, if it's clean, fantastic, but we're actually not being told whether it's clean, green, and we're not being told where does this sit with our nuclear-free legacy, and should we not be having a public discussion about this? Again, like so many things happen. No, we don't do public discussions anymore. The Ministry of Business and Industry, they tell us what to do, and good little dollars march along and we do what we're told. So, we've got guys like the Night Off there, and then, of course, we've got on the coast up there, we've got people like Glenn Dummon, and he's got his house up there. And that's where, next year, that's where Jacinda Ardern was going to have a wedding. But unfortunately, what happened was one of those naughty DJ friends of Clark, Gayford Clark, broke quarantine, and then they went to a party in Auckland, and then from there the tracking technology for COVID, which was designed by Peter Thiel's company, funded by Jeffrey Epstein, started noticing that actually the people with potential COVID spreads were actually going from the party in Auckland to strip clubs and brothels, and then into more seedy and dodgy places. And meanwhile, as it spread to the music festivals, where these DJs were all going with a DJ name Red Rum, which is an acronym. It's when you spell it backwards, it's a name of a heroin type, which is called means murder, literally Red Rum backwards murder, like from The Shining. But that was standing. Um, these guys were being tracked, and then the tracking technology had a little glitch. How inconvenient. And then Gayford Clark was found actually trying to get his friends non-digital tracking systems to find out whether they had COVID or not. And I guess they needed to know that because otherwise they couldn't come to the wedding. Oh, Dash, guess what? The wedding got cancelled. But in the meantime, nobody turned around and said, hey, wait a minute. Why is a billionaire giving a prime minister a wedding to actually have a host a house? Don't we think that's a bit of a conflict of interest? And who is this guy? Oh, John Griffin, the guy that runs this place. He's friends with Glenn Dubin. Actually, not friends. They're co-founders of the Robin Hood Foundation, which is a big, huge tax rort, and it involves people like P Diddy and Oprah Winfrey, who's promoting Jacinda's book, a special kind of power. Um, and turns out that's a big tax rort. And was it actually the soup kitchen? What was the soup kitchen that Jacinda actually worked at? She always makes a big deal about the soup kitchen, but she never actually named it or provided any paperwork, because I don't think actually it was a soup kitchen. I think when she worked as an intern, she was actually working for this big actual international organisation, which is basically a money laundering pit for the Epstein Club. And part of these guys have been set up by mansions in New Zealand: Peter Thiel, Larry Page, Paul, the Wizard of Wall Street, Julian Roberts, who again was meeting with John Key and saying, "Oh, New Zealand should be great. We should buy up all these golf courses, luxury resorts, and billionaires can come here and they can use it as a safe investment for when our people get sick and tired and want to start lynching them. In the meantime, we better make sure that this is a good police state. So we're going to do exactly what they've done in Greenland. All the PayPal mafia are going to try and move in there and use the place as a beta testing for their AI technology, which of course." In Greenland, they're also there because of all the minerals and lithium. So when the guy who ran aviation went down a submarine, they went poof, along with the other Indian guy who was also involved in some other AI technology, along with about 9 billionaires that all died in 2024, all involved in AI technology that would soon become very relevant to the Iran-Israeli war, and the software tracking AI systems that they use in Israel, like Lavender, which are literally used kill list. That's what they use. So and again, supported by geospatial mapping from Rocket Lab. So again, Rocket Lab's now in the genocide game. And this is all what New Zealand, this is our legacy, along with America's Cup. Yeah, United Arab Emirates going around carrying out genocide in the Yemen, supported by their partner, Lockheed Martin, who somehow is supposedly a sustainable development goal partner for the Agenda 2030 and Vision 2030, which was largely supported by America's Cup ambassador Helen Clark, whose foundation, the Helen Clark Foundation, is actually co-involves the same people that were partners with Paul McElwee and Ozzie Malcolm, the promoter of the America's Cup, who was involved in human trafficking. It's not a particularly good scene, Helen. Like we realised that the Vision 2030 wasn't what it was, what we were told it was, because Jamal Khashoggi exposed Vision 2030 as a plan for the Arab kingdoms to basically turn themselves into a big brother digital gulag, just like the Power Mafia wants for Mafia, just like they want to do for New Zealand when they set up like nearly, I think there's 6 AI centres right now. One Amazon, Microsoft, the one that's down in Southland, which connects to the one that they want to do in Taranaki, and that also has the one round about Auckland that also connects to the one in Sydney. And we don't know what any of these AI centres have been developed for. We don't know who the people actually who they are. We don't really have a really good idea about who they are or what they're involved in previously. We do know that it's Five Eyes friendly, so we're tracking ourselves back to the Peter Thiel company. And we do know that it'll allow them, once we get the sufficient power for them, to allow them to basically turn the entire country into a digital, again, like another digital gulag. The sustainable crowd that don't want to believe in chemtrails and heart to heart also don't want to believe in the fact that 50 mini cities are not about sustainability, that they are about digital gulags. And they don't want to believe them right up until they start seeing Donald Trump rolling out freedom cities in Washington, where they're using these companies like Palantir to basically turn them into, again, police states, and then they start getting worried and go, Donald Trump, he wants to create a digital gulag. I'm going, yeah, but that's the same. That's the same thing as your 15-minute city. You know why? Because it's the same technology and it's the same fucking companies. You dumbasses. So when Jacinda Ardern does her 15-minute her Christchurch call, supported by the United Arab Emirates, the Saudi Arabia, Qatar, all members of Vision for 2030, all murderous dictatorships bent on censorship. You really think that's about stopping hate crime? And why is it that the money that was donated to the Christchurch Foundation, uh, actually, what happened to the money for all those people that were killed in the Christchurch tragedy of 2019? I went into Christchurch Foundation, and then it gets all very curious, because then again, it turns out Christchurch Foundation is involved in things like Israel's own version of digital cities, with Hilda Merrill talking about digital currency and tying us into, again, into this whole global area where we are just fucking cattle for their little private games and space relations, where they have their private bunkers and their private islands and their private space stations. While we endure the horrible worstness that's going to come, they've got themselves insulated and sheltered and just basically exploiting the crap out of us with this technology. That's the special kind of power they've got in mind for us. And again, this Christchurch Foundation, oh, well, that's Humphrey Rolleston, very conservative old boy, Christchurch boy, involved in lots of military industrial companies involving Israel and other dubious members of the Ronald Reagan Iran-Contra Club, involved in New Zealand, helicopters in New Zealand, basically gunships, on their own website said, gunship specialist tactics. And his good buddy Alan Hubbard from the South Canterbury Finance that went into liquidation. 4 years after my book turned around and exposed basically what a bunch of crap was going on at Montreal at 254 Scales House Trading, full of embezzlers, Russian mafia, people involved in peddling the nuclear weapons of mass destruction technology, just a real snake pit. 2010 it falls over. Oh, it turns out a few years later that Alan Hubbard's got a Panama Papers file. Oh yes, but according to the local papers, oh no, that doesn't necessarily mean that he was doing anything naughty. Well, look, he's tied up with Sylvanus George Robinson, he's involved in the policy exchange, and they want to use AI technology to clamp down on Islamic extremism. So in other words, again, in the UK, they use the model Islamic extremism to get the middle class to go along with it, because that's what they're afraid of. Over here, we talk about right-wing extremists because this is what we're afraid of. But it still boils down to being the same thing. They will use this technology to control and put in censorship. And they will use it to close down all dissenting voices. And they'll use it to stop all awkward questions. This is my little introduction today on the book. The last two videos, this one and the one beforehand, I'm writing is a little book I'm writing at the moment called The Epstein Class Down Under. If you want to get hold of it, send me a PM message, send me an email, hell, send me a text, 0221 954 323. Tell your friends about this video, let them know about it. The book will be coming out later in the year. We will have it as an e-model form, which you can just buy, or you can actually buy a copy of us, which I'm going to basically sell for about $40 postage, and then I'm also going to ask you to put in a COA to cover the cost and expenses, because basically you don't make a lot of books. It'll be limited edition, there'll only be 200 books, and basically, once you've got it, feel free to photocopy it as much as you like and plagiarise it as well and give it to everyone else, because that'll actually what will happen anyway. But at least it'll get the information out there, because at the end of the day, that's what's really, really important. Thank you very much, and I hope you've enjoyed this particular episode of the Shipping News, what I like to call the Deadline TV, and we'll have another great little installment for you next month.